Our families, hundreds of years ago, didn't have a last name. Why did we not have a last name? Because we didn't have an identity, because we were someone's slave. We're living in an age where the digital companies, the Web2 companies, Facebook, Amazon, those guys, are basically the biggest rent seekers in the world. They become the landlords. This is a landlord environment. If you have 1 million followers on Instagram, it's not yours. You actually become a slave to Instagram. How many musicians make money actually streaming on Spotify? 0. You care about the virtual reputation. That status is valuable. And so if that's true, then why don't you get to own it? If you own your data, if you own your identity, if you own your digital property rights, all the value flows to you.
Obviously, Facebook, Instagram, they don't want you to.
This is happening right now.
What a pleasure to have Yat Siu with us. He is the co-founder and executive chairman of Animoca Brands. He is the superstar. As we walk to this room, he's been stopped by, I think, 1,000 people, right? Finally, you're here.
Thank you. No, I'm not a superstar, but much appreciated. Thank you.
I watch a lot of your interviews, and one thing you mention over and over again is the importance of property rights. Can you tell us more what you mean by that?
Well, generally, the foundation of capitalism can only work with property rights. If you don't have ownership of something, then you don't have the freedom to do things with it. And so owning something means that you have the freedom to transact, to do stuff, and nobody else can tell you what to do with it. It's the ultimate form of freedom. And when I talk about property rights, not just digital property rights, I talk about the ultimate form of ownership, which is ownership in yourself. Now, that sounds a little bit philosophical, but you own a name.
Yes.
And that name is who you are, and it's your identity. Our families, hundreds of years ago, didn't have a last name. Why did we not have a last name? Because we didn't have an identity, because we were someone's slave. We were the property of someone else.
I didn't know that.
I mean, you know, many of our last names are based on the district we live from, the village we're in, or maybe our profession, right? Because we didn't have a name. We had to basically adopt the name of the area eventually when we had the freedom to do so, and said, okay, I come from the city, so I'll be named after the city. I live next to this lake, so I'll be named after this lake. And what happens when you have a name? You have an identity. And when you have an identity, you own your own property. You own yourself. That's the beginning. The beginning of that freedom. I know it sounds like, you know, in a world where most people seem free and have the freedom, they take it for granted. That's the other thing. Like, we take our democracies for granted. We don't always go to vote. But that's a freedom we fought for. Just how thousands of years ago, we fought for our freedom to have our own name.
我研究了一下我们频道的观众年龄层分布啊，最近我看到一个很特别的合作，可能会让很多的观众回忆大喷发。突袭暗影传说 Raid Shadow Legends 呢，居然把忍者龟请到游戏里面了。4只不同武器的忍者龟，再加上艾普莉尔还有施莱德6个经典角色一起登场，而且游戏画面呢有够精致啊！这次合作呢不只是跟角色致敬，每一个英雄在游戏里面都有完整的技能设计，你可以自己组队作战。游戏里面的英雄呢分成攻击型啊、防御型还有辅助型，考验技术啦，组合呢搭配好就可以打出一整套的连锁技，超过瘾的。登入7天就可以解锁传说英雄米开朗基罗，而且解锁之后呢，还可以透过限时活动收集其他5位的英雄。现在用频道的专属连结下载或者是扫描 QR code， 就可以免费领取2位史诗英雄，还有2位的传说英雄。3大开局福利哦，第一个开局就送史诗英雄塔格尔，第二个升到15级呢再送芬妮，第三个输入活动码之后呢，可以从6位传说英雄当中挑出1位。那6位有谁呢？绿松护卫卢雅克、流浪者爱丽丝、图汉纳拉克、孙悟空，还有臭胡子索林跟终极亡灵骑士。那我觉得攻击型的孙悟空蛮值得拿的，因为它能偷技能效果，也可以直接无视防御打爆对手。这款游戏支援手机啊、iPad 还有电脑跨平台，不管你在哪里都可以玩。如果你想要看看这一次忍者龟在游戏里面的造型，或者是想要领这一波免费的英雄，可以扫描画面上的这个 QR code， 或者是直接点影片下方资讯栏的连结，就可以立刻下载。
But it could be my freedom to not vote.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that is, and I think this is the thing. You have the freedom to do so as long as you don't hurt someone else, and that's fine. But I think the point is that respecting how you got that freedom is, you know, an important aspect around that, right? So, and I think this is why property rights is so important, because most people will agree that you should own your own things. You shouldn't give it to someone else. And the dangerous arguments that happened were, you know, I grew up in Europe during the time when we had still East and Western Europe. And in a very super socialist environment, like true communism, not that we see that anymore today in this construct, you don't own any property. And the idea of not owning property was meant to say we can all be equal. We don't have to worry about this house and that house you live in. But that's not what makes us human, right? We are different. Every person is different. We want to identify in different ways, and we express ourselves in the kinds of property that we have.
And how does that translate to the digital world?
Well, the digital world is relevant here because where do we spend most of our time?
Online.
Digital. We spend, depending where, 8 to 10 hours a day online. So our value system is entirely online. How many people care more about how many followers they have on Instagram, how many likes they get? I mean, how many people pay, I don't know about you, but I do know a lot of people who are younger than me, who spend a lot of time preparing their photos and expressing themselves in social media.
Yeah.
That's effort and time that they're giving away freely. But it's important because that recognition, that reputation is more important than their physical one. I grew up in a time where it was important which restaurants you went to, which clubs you were seeing, what newspapers were writing about you. Now we care about what influencer talks about you, how many likes you have on Instagram, how many followers do you have, how much cred you have in a game. You care about the virtual reputation. That status is valuable. And so if that's true, then why don't you get to own it? At least in the physical world, you own your reputation. But in the digital world, if you have 1 million followers on Instagram, it's not yours. You actually become a slave to Instagram, because what happens is that if Instagram says, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to delete your account, likelihood is that you will comply instead of saying, well, I can go somewhere else, because guess what? You can't.
Yeah.
And that's why digital property rights is the ultimate form of that, because now I own this and I can take it somewhere else. And the token infrastructure allows you to do that. So I can basically now take my assets elsewhere, just how I can take my Bitcoin. It is mine. Nobody else can take that away. My digital reputation in the form of my NFTs or my assets or my tokens, I can actually transfer freely, and people can follow that and give me credit for that. Like when you think about digital reputation, why can I not take my Uber rating and my Amazon rating to somewhere else?
I don't know.
Well, because they don't want you to. Because obviously they want you to stay in Amazon.
Of course.
So if I wanted to open a new account on eBay or somewhere else, I have to start all over again.
Yeah.
That switching cost is high. But it was you who built up the effort. You built a network. It is your customers, and yet actually you built their customers, right? We're living in an age where the digital companies, the Web2 companies, Facebook, Amazon, those guys, are basically the biggest rent seekers in the world. They've become the landlords. This is a landlord environment. In Hong Kong, and I'm sure maybe Taipei has a similar issue, when you make a restaurant, if you don't own the property of a restaurant, you will keep paying higher rent, until eventually you basically have nothing and the landlord gets everything. And guess what? You just made the value of the land valuable, because people go there for attention and then they rent it to some other restaurant for higher rent, and you're out of business because you don't own that land. That's digital land. Basically, digital property is the version of that. Do you want to keep paying rent to Instagram? Now, you might say it's free, but the reality is that the data you're generating, they make money off you. They make money off in the billions. In fact, trillion-dollar market caps come from that. The advertising industry is about $1.1 trillion a year, of which 70 to 80% is owned by Apple, Facebook, Google, those guys. They make all that value. How do they make it? Because of you. You're spending time. Who's bringing in customers? You, because you're advertising and promoting and telling your friends about it. Who spends hours trying to figure out how to make the photo attractive so they can get more likes, so they can get more advertising? You, right? And how much do you get paid? There's a very small percentage, like the Taylor Swifts or the Mr. Beasts of the world, that can make money from this, but the vast majority does not. And this is not just for social media, it's music. How many musicians make money actually streaming on Spotify? Zero.
Really?
No, they make piddles. They use Spotify basically as a way to promote themselves, and they make money from gigs and performances. Right? And so you have 70 to 80-year-old performers that could be streamed billions of times, and they still do shows because that's how they pay their bills. Right? That type of stuff, because they don't have property ownership in the digital realm. So this is why digital property rights is so fundamentally important.
Okay, I understand that it is important, but in real life, what would it look like? Let's say now people care about this topic enough to make a change. Do we switch platforms, or because obviously Facebook, Instagram, they don't want you to.
The platform's already here. It's called blockchain. If you basically build out on blockchain, it may appear that you have less customers because the ecosystem is smaller.
Yes.
However, you make much more money per user. So there's a concept in 2008 published by Kevin Kelly. It's called 1,000 True Fans. And the idea back then was that you get 1,000 true fans, you'll be fine. Because they will pay you $100 for whatever it is that you want, right? And you see this in restaurants and artifacts and things like Etsy and so on. You see those 1,000 true fans. Well, of course, now the value has to be higher, but what's 1,000 true fans in crypto? You see them in NFTs and token holders, and they spend a lot more than $100. You can build bigger business from that. So you don't need 10 million customers. You just need thousands, maybe tens of thousands of very concentrated users, and you will basically have a sort of ensured revenue stream and then build and expand from that base. The problem is that whether you're on Spotify or Instagram, the people who follow you, you don't know how many of them are following you just because they're being polite or because they're interested. But are they your true fan? No, they're not your true fan. How do I know that you're a true fan? I need to know who's the person who interacts with my post 10 times a day or 100 times a day. I need to know the one who's thinking about my content, who cares about what I do. That's my 1,000 true fans. But we can't know this unless you own the data. How do you own the data? On-chain. One way to prove the data is what NFTs do you have? How much money have you invested? That's the first way in which you can measure that. But it's not the only way, right? How many things have you transacted? How many hours have you played? You don't know that, but you know that basically on blockchain because it's all on-chain. And so now you create a market from that. Your data becomes the market, and that only doesn't, and it means you as an end user, by the way, get rewarded too, because now I can say, oh, I go to your podcast and I listen to your content so many hours. What if I make content that's similar, a different twist, but now I can reach you directly because I know that you would appreciate this stuff. So the whole advertising customer segmentation market changes. So I mentioned about the $1 trillion of advertising. So what's the advertising efficiency rate on Facebook?
I have no idea.
Less than 10%. So, I mean, that's scattershot. You're basically going out and, spending $1 million and really only 100,000 reaches the customer. And in many cases, much less than that. So that's basically huge wasted effort, right? Now, if you can be more direct and targeted because you have the open data, then what happens is that you spend more efficient dollars in advertising, which means more money is captured in the value chain between the businesses and the end user. That's why airdrops work, because I give people an airdrop, and if the airdrop is owned by a user and he uses an ecosystem, is much more likely to spend in the ecosystem, whether it's a game or blockchain, rather than just cashing out, which is basically what's happening with Web2 companies. Like in the gaming industry, we spend $100 billion a year advertising games. The average cost per paying customer is about $80 to $85 to bring in to become a paying customer, which means unless your game makes more than $85 per user, you're toast. Now, of the billions of dollars that Facebook, Google, Apple make advertising your game, not to mention 30% cut they take off the revenue share, how much do they reinvest back into the gaming ecosystem?
0.
That's right.
Because I've watched your interviews.
Thank you. But the point is it's 0, right? Now, if a portion of that value goes to the gamer, or all of the value goes to the gamer, the chances of him spending in your game is much higher. And even if he doesn't spend it in your game, he might spend it in another game. And so it generally benefits the ecosystem as a whole, right? So this is the whole point about ownership. If you own your data, if you own your identity, if you own your digital property rights, all the value flows to you. Those trillions of dollars of value they generated should be distributed and owned by the end users that provided that value in the first place. That's why it's so important. And blockchain is the mechanism to do that. And so it's not about having 10 million users. It's about having true fans. And they could be millions. But if you know who your 1,000 true fans are, you've got your foundation for your business. And that's what really every creator, every developer, every small shop owner really wants to have.
So in 10 years, when you look at social media, for example, are we talking about thousands of different platforms, all with a smaller fan base? Or what does it look like? Like in crypto, we understand this.
I think the way you can think of it is how many tokens are there today and how many tokens will there be in the future. So in other words, so right now we have millions and millions of tokens, and there'll be billions of tokens. And the mental model I see of it is in forms of attention is the websites. So if you remember you might be too young to know this, but in the 90s, we used to have this thing called a website, a normal website, and that was the way that we would build attention. And today, we have actually billions of websites because they're now encapsulated in the form of TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. So you as an individual probably have 10, 20, 30 websites, with your business, with those sort of presences. Each of these are going to be tokens because they're essentially ways in which you can value the attention of your network. They don't have to be worth a lot. But imagine if you could consolidate all of the forms of your websites to yourself based on your business or your activity. Well, that's one way in which you capture the value because it's not segregated, it's connected. And once it becomes interoperable, you basically have the benefit of that free trade, of that flow, right? So that's the first part. So you're going to have billions of tokens. To me, this means that you're going to have billions of tokens distributed amongst the creators and the users. You'll have a token, I'll have a token, my daughter will have a token, my friends will all have tokens. We may never see the token directly, but we'll be able to transact with them, and they'll be part of this money system and the ecosystem if I want to do business with you. And then what happens is that you're going to have some of these explode in terms of becoming much bigger, and then they become their own platforms, right? You have big companies, you have small companies. So small companies will still have on the back end their token infrastructure. And to me, this is no different than what we see with data centers and with, Amazon Web Services, for instance. 99% of the world is just going to outsource to Amazon Web Services. But if you're big enough, you have your own data center, or you have your own web servers, because you need that scale and that's the functionality or that optimization, right? So I see exactly the same framing. So there'll be people everyone will have a token, will be represented in this way. Whether they know it's a token or not is almost secondary, because it could be abstracted.
Mm-hmm. As in, like, how? Okay, so I have my token, you have your token. How do we interact?
Okay, so the way that you might interact, two ways. And just the beautiful thing about blockchain is that third parties can come in and do the interaction for you. So if you have a token and I have a token, and I'm using Facebook as a platform to interact, but I don't like that, or someone else goes, you know what, Facebook's taking too much money. I'll make a platform to allow your interactions to interact better with the other. That's actually where this grows. And property ownership, the beautiful thing about property ownership is the unlimited composability that happens. So the fact that we own physical cars is the reason you have Uber, Lyft, tire companies, baby seat companies, people who hire drivers, people who basically, create sort of, sound devices. Like the industry of people building stuff for people who own cars is bigger than the people who are selling cars, right? That's the opportunity. And so that composability is what blockchain is at its root. When you're building something on blockchain, it's composable. So if you have a token, be it an NFT or just a general token, someone else can come in, I'm going to interact with your token. I'm going to build DeFi, or I'm going to build a game on top of it. I'm going to use it. Now he'll do it because he'll want access to that customer base. You get benefit because it ends up greasing your ecosystem and growing it, and there's more utility. And ultimately, you're now building relationships, whether you like it or not, within your ecosystem. Right. And that's the power. So all transactions are relational in a way, especially in Asia. Often you start with money and you can make friendships as well. That happens as well. But the point is that transactions are relational in a construct, but it's often one-to-one. It's hard to scale relations, right? What social media companies have done is they've abstracted relations and created it on scale en masse, but they've made it sort of commoditized, meaning that your like and my like are not differentiated. But that's not true, right? If Elon Musk was to follow me on X, my value would be much higher than 100,000 random people, as much as I might like them, right? The value is different, right? So we can't say that every like is the same or every follow is the same. It's not true, but they don't want you to know that. In blockchain, you cannot ascertain that. And that means that I can now create more relationship with another by people who I'm not even interacting with. If we have a token, someone can build applications on top of your ecosystem and build relations on your behalf and benefit from it without me ever doing anything, right? And then next thing I know, I might have a community that was built from someone else. We all become almost like our mini states, our mini nations that we can build our communities from.
So this is not just an idea, this is happening, right?
This is happening right now.
Okay, tell me the time horizon, how many years until we see this happening?
Oh, I think it's going to be within the next 10 years.
10 years?
So, and the reason why I think this is going to accelerate so quickly is a couple of things. One, the advent of AI is going to accelerate everything. So AI is going to be transacting at light speed everywhere. We're all going to have multiple AI agents doing stuff for us. What is the native asset that they're going to be trading on? It's going to be crypto. They don't have bank accounts. They can't do KYC, right? And they're going to be doing this 24/7. So that's also the reason we think of crypto as a natural hedge towards AI. Like if you can't invest in OpenAI, then maybe you own Bitcoin. That's your hedge towards an AI future, as an example, right? But that basically means that we're going to have this proliferation of that. And this will happen very, very quickly. The second thing is all companies and institutions are all going to tokenize. This is something that was already happening, but was held back because the US was so hostile before under the previous administration. With Trump coming in and crypto becoming much more bipartisan, this entire market is blowing wide open because the whole world now, if they want to do business with the US, they need to be pro-crypto. So that's going to accelerate, and it's going to basically do what we saw with the internet. The internet grew slowly and then it exploded. Crypto grew slowly and then it exploded too. And exactly what the internet did for information, right? We're now having the value and value creation at the speed of the internet is what we're seeing with blockchain. which before we had with knowledge and information with the advent of the internet.
I have so many other questions that I would like to ask you, but I know you have to go. Please come back soon. Let's do it virtually. I'd love to ask you about GameFi and all that. You know, you are the GOAT when it comes to these.
Maybe before I go, I'll give you my 2 cents on GameFi.
Right.
So first of all, on-chain activity on gaming is the highest, as in it's higher than before. Also, most of the on-chain activity is related to GameFi. However, most of the activity that happens in crypto today is trading, not necessarily playing games.
True.
It's happening in centralized exchanges. So we have about 500 million people that own crypto now in different exchanges, somewhere around that number, right? Individual users. But there's only about 10% of them that are on-chain. And so the reason we don't feel this impact is because the people who own your token and the people who play your game are not necessarily the same.
True.
The Venn diagram between the two are not the same. But that number, as more people go on-chain, is changing. This will have a big impact on GameFi. The second thing I will say, and that's happening sooner, like we're very bullish on crypto gaming next year. The reason why is GTA 6. And it's not because we think Take-Two is going to tokenize. It's going to be that it's going to bring the emphasis back into gaming. You need these triggers. Like what created the big trigger on gaming in the metaverse back in 21? It was Facebook renaming itself to Meta. What's the trigger we think that's going to do that from a macro scale? It's going to be GTA 6 because it's going to be the biggest cultural event ever. It's going to be in the gaming area. It's going to drive more console sales. It's going to increase prices of games, more game revenue. And then more importantly, GTA 6 has the ability to run your own RP servers, role-play servers. So basically means it's a decentralized ecosystem. And I'm very certain that people are going to start running crypto on these RP servers. And they're going to grow those ecosystems. And so it's going to be a pretty exciting time, I think, next year.
Can we have you on next year then?
Oh, you can have me on before that, of course. It'll be my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
you.
Such a great insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.